Here are some reasons why you should buy the PortKeys BM5 Mark II monitor. 1. It looks good. Physically. It's a nice compact size, has a metal body. It looks good on your camera. It looks professional. 2. It has a lot of great features. Has some nice waveform displays built in. It can do LUTs. Has a lot of great control over the image here. It has custom function buttons across the top. It has a lot of connectivity as far as inputs and outputs. Has SDI in and out, HDMI in over here. 3. This can control your camera. So if you have a Panasonic GH5, a Z-Cam, or a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, 4K or 6K, this can control your camera. And that's a pretty sweet feature. And it can do it with a simple cable. You don't need any additional modules here. Oh, and also, it's really bright. This is brighter than the Ninja 5. It's brighter than the LH5, also from PortKeys. So that's really nice to have when you're in daylight. It looks good, like I said, in the hand. It's got nice metal finish here, metal body. On the top here we have our custom function buttons. The scroll wheel that controls the menu, exit button to exit the menu. This little LED light here tells us when the power's on. Although it's not very bright, it's kind of useless in my opinion. This is a 1/4-20 mounting hole. We have another one on the bottom, right here. Continuing on the bottom, we have the camera remote input. That's for attaching and connecting to your camera so you can control your camera. This is a USB port for loading LUTs and firmware. On this side over here, we have the HDMI input, headphone output, and then a power switch. The other side is just a vent, no connections there, no switches. On the back, we have a number of things. The SDI input and output. This is a power output for connecting to the Bluetooth module here, and this end here. And that provides power to the Bluetooth module. The Bluetooth module itself has some additional connections here for powering other devices. But let me return to the basics of this monitor. Slot here for the NPF battery. This is the release, which is a little hard to get to with the module hooked on here with this Bluetooth module. It kind of gets in the way. But this is all metal, which again, it feels nice and strong. This connection here is a power input. So if you have a D-tap battery, you can use the supplied cable here to go from D-tap to this power input and power your monitor all day long off the other battery. Some of the other accessories are an antenna for the Bluetooth module, and then I have some cables here for connecting to cameras. This is a 3-pin that the Z-Cam uses. It goes to the USB micro connector, which is on the bottom, and this one is a 4-pin for the Panasonic. The Blackmagic camera uses the Bluetooth module to connect. They also give you a USB thumb drive here, and it's formatted with the proper folder structure for loading LUTs and firmware. So you'll kind of need to make sure that it stays that way, otherwise you won't be able to get LUTs or firmware on here because it's pretty particular how that works. So all these accessories aside, I guess there's one more I should talk about. This glass screen. Now, I don't know why it wasn't just on here to begin with, but it's nice that they give you this now. Initially, when this thing came out, they didn't even have this. They started shipping these to existing customers. So the way this works, as I understand it, is you remove these 4 screws in the corner, remove the metal bezel, and then put the screws on, and it holds it there. So this gives you a nice glass protector for the screen. It's nice that they add it, but I kind of wish it was just a part of the thing, not a separate piece. They should have just come pre-installed. Of course, I feel that way about the Bluetooth module. So this thing, as nice as it looks, it's also metal and it's screwed onto the body. It feels like an afterthought. Why isn't this just built in? If you think about your cell phone has Bluetooth and it's tiny. This thing is a large chunk of metal here just to do Bluetooth. And I guess it does have some controls here, some outputs for other devices, but all of this could be built into the monitor and to keep it a much smaller size. You can see how this side is kind of bulky compared to this size and the overall thickness. I'd like to see these things built in the future, and I'm sure that's what they're going to do in the future. You have a couple of options for mounting the BM5. You can see that on the bottom and top you have a 1/4-20, and you have a helicoil in there, so you're not going to just strip out some aluminum threads. It actually has steel threads in there. I'm a little disappointed to see that we don't have RE locating pins. Instead, we have these little recessed areas, and PortKeys told me, well, you can buy this thing here, which is a little device that they sell for mounting your monitor to a camera or something else. it tilts and swivels. It has these little nubs that are very similar to RE locating pins, but not quite the same thing, and I'll show you why. So I'll just tighten that by hand, and here's my problem with it. It spins. This is very much not like RE locating pins. RE locating pins are solid, and they certainly don't move like this moves. That's a real disappointment in my book. Even if I tighten this up really, really hard, it's still gonna spin, and so I just don't really understand why they didn't just put RE locating pins on this thing. I mean, it has a metal body. Another thing about this is the only device I could find that has those nubs. The design of this thing is proprietary as far as I can tell. I can't find anything else out there that has these kind of shallow nubs. These are actually spring-loaded too, that would mate with this, so I really don't like this system. Now you do have another way of mounting this, and that's this device right here. It gives you a natal rail, an RE rosette, and some mounting holes, and it fits just like this on the monitor. So now I have this mounted with these 2 screws, and you can see what it looks like here, and it doesn't interfere with the vents on this side. There's no buttons or connections on this side anyway. This is probably a pretty good solution if you have a NATO clamp. You can mount this on. You just hold it like this, basically. I forgot to mention that the PortKeys BM5 Mark II comes in this nice hard case. It's not as nice as like an SKB. This is kind of a cheaper plastic, but I don't think it really needs to be much nicer. I think this is good enough. It holds the monitor. You can put some cables in there. It's foam lined, just like that. So it's lightweight and small and compact. I tend to not use these because I travel very light, so I will just put this in like a padded pouch in a backpack or in a suitcase. I might just roll it up and around in a bunch of clothes or something soft like that to protect it. These are built pretty well. I mean, there's not a lot of parts in here that are going to break very easily other than the screen, and this one has that glass on there, so I'm not very worried about that as long as you can protect that face. Nothing back here is really going to break on it. I don't think so. You'd have to try really, really hard to do that. I think one of the best ways to review a product is to compare it with other similar products. That way you can see some of its features and how they stand out compared to these other ones here. So I have the BM5 Mark II here, of course. This is the PortKeys LH5. This is the Atomos Ninja 5. One thing I like about the Atomos over these two is it has mounting holes on the top and bottom, and they have RE locating pins. If you don't know what that means, they're just pins that keep it from spinning when you attach it. They're in line with the body so that it can't unscrew itself. And that's a really, really handy feature to have. Between the 3 of these, I think the LH5 is the smallest and the lightest. These all have roughly the same screen size, 5 inches. This is 5.2. But this is definitely much, much, much lighter. It has just a plastic body. You might call it cheap, but I think the lightweightness, that's pretty important in a lot of situations. Having it on camera means it's going to be a lot lighter load for you carrying this thing around. The Atomos Ninja 5 is kind of a different beast compared to these. It has some features that these ones don't have in regards to recording. So you can attach a hard drive here, and this thing will record internally in 10-bit ProRes. That's a really incredible feature, and it's just now recording RAW, ProRes RAW, from the Nikon Z6, Z7 cameras. And in the future, probably actually very soon, it'll record ProRes RAW from the Zcam cameras. That's a pretty important feature. You may not think highly of ProRes RAW, but it's another option for people who aren't in the Blackmagic environment, the ecosystem. So maybe they're not shooting in B-RAW. Maybe they're not even using Resolve or Premiere. You know, B-RAW, you can use it in Premiere. It's not so great, I guess, but ProRes RAW, kind of the same story. Right now, I think it only works with Final Cut Pro, which is only on Mac. It's supposed to be in Premiere at some point, so hopefully Resolve will pick it up. But it's just nice to have another option, and to have a device like this that can record externally makes this a special monitor relative to these two. It's also more expensive. This clocks in around $700. I haven't talked about the pricing yet. This is around $500, and this one is like $250, I think. It's a much more affordable option. Otherwise, they have a lot of similarities as far as powering. These all accept Sony NPF style batteries. They have HDMI input. This one doesn't have HDMI output though. These ones do, which is nice. You can pass the signal through. This does have SDI in and out, and it has cross conversion, which means if you go in if you go in HDMI, you can go out SDI. So if you need an SDI converter, this works. These don't have SDI at all. There is an SDI module for this, but I think it's like $150 or $200, and it sits in this spot here. Now, one thing I really like the PortKeys for over the Atomos are these custom function buttons right here. Having actual physical buttons, in my opinion, is always faster and better than having touchscreen controls. The Atomos is entirely touchscreen. There's only a physical power switch over here, and at that, this is momentary. So if you had to pull power, like say you had a battery powering everything and you pulled your battery, when you plug your battery back in, this wouldn't turn on, whereas these ones have physical on-off switches, and so you can leave them in the on position, so when you apply power, they turn back on automatically. I think that's a pretty nice feature, so you don't have to think about powering on your devices when you change batteries. Now, as far as brands go, PortKeys is a Chinese brand, Atomos is an Australian brand, and I don't know if you've had experience with Atomos. I haven't had to have anything repaired, but I've heard some horror stories in that regard, as far as their customer service and whatnot. I don't really have brand loyalty. I just like products that work. If I have to deal with their customer service, then that comes into effect, that comes into play, if they have good customer service or not. Of course, I've been working with PortKeys because they sent me both these monitors for review, and I own their PortKeys EVF as well. So I enjoy their products. I think they're very good. I've used this one quite a bit as well. Of course, it is a good product as well. So I'm kind of just limited to PortKeys and Atomos when it comes to monitors. I haven't used Small HD or Abel's, what's the other brand, Andy Cine, or these other ones that you can get really cheaply on Amazon. I'm only used to these brands. So I have the monitor plugged into my GH5S and just got this little simple scene set up. I'm going to run through some of the features that I've got programmed in here. First, on function 1, I put a custom LUT. There we go. It gives it a bit of color since I have the GH5S in Vlog. I'm also going to turn my waveform, so that's something I usually have on. And we can see right away that this one's a little different than some other monitors. At the first time you push it, you get a full screen display of a waveform. That's really nice. It moves your video down here to a little preview. Push it again. Now you have a waveform plus a parade waveform down here and a vector scope. Push it again, and it gives you even more. So you can see we have audio meters. This is a parade histogram, a regular histogram, regular waveform, vector scope, and a parade waveform down here. This is pretty cool. And then the last one is the one that I would normally use, just the small waveform down here in the corner. And you can see if I push to this button really fast, I can jump to the mode that I need, so you don't have to wait for it to get to that particular mode. If you press and hold the button that you have assigned to the waveform, you have some options here. You can see that I can change the waveform, and I can move it around on the screen so it's in a different position. Full screen, 4-screen, all types, user mode, and then options. Oh, look at this. So you can go full screen and then change the type of monitor. So vector scope, or parade, Luma waveform, histogram, parade, histogram, vector scope. And additionally, you can turn the video preview on and off. And blending. Oh, I see. For the preview here, you can change how translucent it is. Now, one nice feature of this one over the LH5 is you can have the crosshairs on at the same time as the waveform. For some reason on the LH5, you could have one or the other, which is really kind of poor, but this one improves that, of course. Just like the LH5, this one gives you all kinds of options. This one has 2 different kinds of inputs, so here you can select which input you're using. All kinds of guides, similar to the other one. These are just for helpers. They're not actually cutting off the video since this is just a monitor. This shows you what it would look like if you were framing it at that size. If you went custom, then you can actually custom size those borders. And then crosshair, which I already have turned on. Grids, again, just like LH5, they give you all kinds of grids, up to 10 different grids. Video config, standard controls for brightness, contrast, color, sharpness, tint. I've played with the color temperature so that it looks good on camera. Aspect is interesting. With this, you can actually squeeze the image, so this is really useful for anamorphic shooting. If you had a kind of an odd ratio scope, you could adjust that here in the user setting. You can actually specify your own ratio. System, this is where we're going to have the controls for how the on-screen display looks, whether it's transparent or not. Let me leave that on. You can save menu settings. Reset the entire thing. Flipping, of course, so you can actually flip if you have the monitor mounted upside down or on a mirror. You can flip also just the on-screen display and leave the monitor normal. So if you wanted to have the image upside down for some reason. And this is nice too. So you can choose what the waveform is seeing. This is something you couldn't do on the LH5. So either pre-LUT or post-LUT. You can see how it changes since the LUT is expanding that dynamic range there. And same thing for the SDI output. You can change pre-LUT or original signal. And then some more controls here for the SDI output. Voltage, this up here in the corner tells me my battery voltage. You can turn that on or off. The fan, now this is interesting too. This has a fan, it's always on, but in the low setting, it's almost inaudible. I don't think this would be a problem for pretty much any situation. Let me turn up the medium here. Fan control, so I don't know if you can even hear that. Medium, not very loud. But high is certainly loud. In a quiet room, this would definitely be a problem. But if you're in a temperature-controlled room, low should be fine. I don't see this thing overheating. The metal body actually helps dissipate the heat. And the touch control, I'll show you what that means. So it's not going to do anything here. Normally, if I touch the screen, it would bring up a menu and give me some controls. Also, if you have camera control turned on, obviously you're going to want touch control turned on. So if you don't want any of that, you don't want to have the stuff popping up, then you can turn that off, which is kind of nice to have. I'll show you what I mean. So I touch the screen, it gives me a menu, shows me what my custom function buttons are assigned to, and the general settings here. If you touch it, you go right into the menu. LUT config, this is where you can turn the LUTs on and off. You can select your LUTs. These two are actually made for Zcam. And then USB looks, if you had the USB drive plugged in under here, you could actually load LUTs from the USB into the monitor. The last setting is firmware. You can update it from the USB stick. This is where you can set what your function buttons do. I have LUT, crosshair, zooming, and waveform turned on. But there's all kinds of settings for the general color and sharpness and all that, aspect ratio, the backlight, that's the brightness of the screen, or rather of the backlight. Camera control, let me turn this one on instead of LUT, because this is something I really want to dig into. So now if I hit that, it's set to Bluetooth, and I don't have anything connected. So if you press and hold that, now you get a menu, and you can see right here, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, Bluetooth. Let me change this. Sony A7R II, A7R3, Canon, and you can see the controls on screen are changing. Canon LANC, Sony LANC, Panasonic. That's the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. Remote, I'm not sure what that means. Zcam E2, I'll definitely play with that one. Let me look at this right here though. I'm curious what these, oh, look at this. This is really cool. Let me turn off the waveform. As you swipe, see these dots down here, you get different pages. This is really cool. I think you could spend a lot of time figuring out what these all do. This looks like zooming or focus bar here. Of course, it's not going to do anything because I don't have that camera plugged in. Then you can control iris. There's your zoom. So this is just a slider, a visual indicator of where your setting is at for focus, iris, and zoom. Also looks like you can have A and B settings. Very cool. This is a menu control, so up, down arrows, the menu button, function buttons. And then just a different way of viewing the controls. So shutter, iris, ISO. Interesting, VFR, that'd be color, temperature. Let me go back in here and see what the other settings are. From Zcam goes back to the beginning, the Blackmagic. Now I'm pretty sure this also will control the 6K. I'll find out though, because I have a 6K, I don't have a 4K. And then left or right, what that means is it's going to turn those controls. Let me get it back on a different camera here. It'll move the controls to the other side, basically flips everything around. So let's dig into the camera control and see what that looks like when we have a camera plugged into this monitor. So now I've plugged in the E2F6 using just a 3-pin LANC cable going into the bottom of the monitor here. And I've got it on one of the menu pages. There's 4 pages for this camera. I also have the menu turned on from the camera here. So this is the camera's menu, and I also have all the icons here around the outside of the screen. So we can see what it's doing here. So this page is really cool because you can see these 3 controls here. This has like boxes. This says FPS. This says VFR. So this is the resolution. We watched, if I push the button here, it's going to cycle the camera to the next resolution up. So 5K 4:3, 5K 6:5. The delay here is actually the camera changing modes, not the monitor. 6K, cinema 4K, and so on and so forth. It'll go to 4K after that. So that's neat. And then of course, if you hit the FPS button, watch my frame rate. If I go down, I'll go down to 25. So now it's in 25. Now it'll go down to 24. And then one more, 23,976. Again, the delay is the camera setting the mode. And then VFR, if I go to the other menu here, which you can do in the camera here, or on this control, if I get the right page, I can actually control what this menu does here. So I go up, I go over here, go into this one. Now I see my VFR menu. So let me go back here to VFR, and you can see if I hit this, it's going to jump that up probably to 1. Yep. And then the next setting is 5. I have it on course. If you had it on fine, you could go step by step through all of the frame rates. So that's pretty interesting. You can control that. The controls are much faster than the LH5. If you watch my video on the LH5, I had to press and wait, press and wait. These controls are very responsive, which is really, really nice to have. The mode is set to auto, so let me change this to manual. Okay. So then if I change the screen back to this and I'm on K, yep, see the 3800K, 4000. If I hold it here, yep, look at that, it climbs really quickly. That's really nice. You can see the color shifting as well on the screen. If I go really, really warm, it's going to look really cool on the camera. So that's pretty nice. ISO, same thing. You can press it a bunch of times, it's going to jump. My ISO setting is right here, ISO 800. If I go down a couple, that's 400. So you can see you can punch it. You can actually hold it as well. It's going to move as long as you're holding it. Auto, that would depend on the camera being set to auto ISO mode. Iris, since I have a Canon electronic lens here, I can control the ISO or the iris. So that's down to F7, F8, F9, F10, 11. And again, it's very responsive. And then shutter as well. So my shutter speed is right here, 360, 216, 180, 150, 120. So now the lens is set to auto. You can see my options turned on here. If I go back to the other page, I should be able to use these. There we go. Look at that. So it has different control speeds here. That's the slowest. These are faster. And the outside one's the fastest. This is the Blackmagic using the Bluetooth module up here. I haven't set this up yet, this communication between this and this camera. This, I plugged in the Bluetooth antenna. I would see about getting a smaller one if it was me, because this is pretty large and obnoxious. But I want to see how easy it is to get this connected to the monitor. So let's hold this button down. Set this to Blackmagic. It says 4K, but it's the Bluetooth. Hopefully this works with this one. And then we'll exit out of that. Turn that on. And so there's a little Bluetooth symbol up here. Let me go into the camera menu and see if I can get this thing to connect. Maybe under setup, I'm not sure. All right, Bluetooth. Turn that on. Says no device, so I'm not sure. Oh, look at that. I hit the Bluetooth button and it says Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. You select it. Wow, this is actually going pretty easy. Let me put that number in 0467797 pair. And it's currently connected to this camera, the BM5 version 2. Well, there you go. I mean, first time, I haven't done this before, and I got it to connect. So now let's turn this on and see. Okay, I gotta swipe the screen here, see what kind of controls I can get. Oh, finally something popped up and I accidentally hit the color temperature button. All right, so that's working. So that's color temperature. Let me see if I can get to these other pages. Oh, okay, focus. Lens is set to autofocus, but yeah, for some reason I can't get any of these two. Oops. Apparently there's a zoom method I'm not aware of. Oh, look at that. Pinch to zoom, guys. That's cool. I didn't know that existed. It's kind of hard to get it back to normal. Okay. I hit the zooming button to get it back. So let me try. Same thing here, this scale. I can't get it to autofocus. For some reason, grabbing this thing is kind of not reliable. It feels, it's weird. It's kind of jumping all over the place. This does not seem to do anything. So that's kind of unfortunate, because this would be really great if it could control the camera. You could, be some distance away from the camera and control it remotely. But it's just not updating enough. I think, let me double check. Yeah, it still says it's connected. Not quite there. Not really doing what it should be doing. So I've attached the Panasonic cable to the GH5S, plugged it into the bottom of the PortKeys monitor, and I have it set here in the camera control settings to Panasonic. So I should be able to control, record, start, stop, and zooming. You can see on this display, this is a relatively simple view. If you swipe it, you get this kind of view. So I see here I have focus. I can trigger the camera, record, start, stop. You can see the camera goes into record. It stops. It's been a few weeks since I shot all that footage. I kind of let myself ramble on there and stumble around just because that's how the average person is going to figure out how to use this monitor. And I was struggling with it, so I had to go to PortKeys to get some answers. So I've learned that some of the controls for the Blackmagic, you just can't use them. So that whole page where you have like the ProRes and BRAW options, you can't actually control that page. They said that there's something with the camera that doesn't allow this to control it or something like that. And I'm thinking, well, why even have that page in the monitor if you can't control the camera from that screen? So I kind of wish they would just take that off, because it's confusing. I thought you could control it. It looks like it would work, but it was just totally unreliable. It didn't really work at all. I'm going to play around with that other screen on here that has that focus screen. That is meant to be used with something like the Tilta Nucleus Nano or one of the other follow focus motors. You can have touch screen control over the motor and not the camera lens itself. I have the Zcam E2 F6 with the Tilta Nucleus Nano motor plugged into the monitor. You connect the cable that has the USB on the other end to the motor, so now the BM5 is powering and controlling the motor, the Nucleus Nano motor. And you go to this screen here that has this chart, this line across the bottom here, and I had to set this to zoom to get it to work, but lo and behold, it is controlling the motor just by sliding that control. And it's got some nice features here, so let me set, that looks to be in focus there. I'll set that as my B point. I'll come out here where it's out of focus, set my A point, and then if I hit auto, boom, it's going to bounce between those two focus points. And it's nice and smooth. You can control the speed, so 1 right here is the fastest. You see if I go up to 10, quite a bit slower. I didn't go all the way up, but it was up in like the 20s, which was painfully slow. I'm not sure why you'd want to use a speed that slow. I could actually see this being a little faster than the speed that it is at 1, perhaps. But that's a pretty cool feature. To get rid of those, you just hit these buttons and it clears those out, and you're back to manual control. Let's see if it has... Wow, yeah, look at that. You hit the calibrate button and it sends the lens into calibration immediately. That's faster than it is when you try to do it either through the wheel or the motor itself. The only thing I can see that's might be a problem is one, it kind of jumps sometimes. If you go really fast, it sounds like the motor jumps. I'm not sure if that's the motor or just the touchscreen control is not as smooth as it could be. And then two, the power from the monitor is only 7.4 volts when you're powering from an NPF battery. So the motor only gets 7.4 volts. This motor can take up to 18 volts and you get higher torque with a higher voltage. I suppose if you're powering this off of a DC supply, maybe they'll get more voltage. I'd have to check that. I can use my Nucleus Nano and control it from the monitor even with the Bluetooth module. The cabling is a little different though. So I'm powering the monitor from the battery. And then out of this focus puller connection, which would usually feed the Nano motor directly, I have this cable that comes with the Bluetooth module, comes into the focus puller connection down there, and then the motor cable comes out of that connection to the Nucleus Nano. And if I spin this around, we can see that I do indeed have focus control with the Nano. So while the Bluetooth module sounds like a good idea, in actuality, it doesn't work well with the camera because it doesn't control all of the features, even though it has menu pages for those features. And also, they sent me initially a Bluetooth module, and this one wouldn't pass the signal to the motor for some reason. The cable coming out here, it just wouldn't control the motor. So they sent me a new Bluetooth module, and that one works, except the connector down here, this focus puller cable connection, is tight and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like it's supposed to go on. These other ones were fine, like they would connect, except also that they sent me additional cables too. So I've got 3 sets of these cables, and this one comes off on that angle, like that's kind of weird. And then this one comes off at a different angle, like down, and you can see that one comes up at a straight up angle. So I mean, that's kind of like a quality control issue. With the cables and even the Bluetooth module. So I mean, if anybody has this Bluetooth module, I'd like to know your experience because mine hasn't been so good. Also, if you look closely at these cables, these connectors, they come off kind of at an angle to the body, like they're down like this. This one's kind of up. It's just, I don't know. I think they need to concentrate on the monitor and maybe not so much all these accessory features. We have the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. This is around 400 nits in brightness. The Atmos Ninja 5 is around 1,000 nits. The LH5 is at around 1,500 nits. And the PortKeys BM5 II is around 2,200 nits. So you can see the difference in the brightness. I think most notably, the Blackmagic is really dim. These ones are all doing pretty good. I'm not sure why the color balance is so different on this one. These are set the same in the menu. And this one's just whatever it's doing. I haven't really adjusted it. But the brightness is all the way up on these. And the image is different because I can't feed a signal from the Blackmagic that will hit this. This one, for some reason, is very picky when it's being passed through other devices. These two will display just fine. This one won't. It wants to be the first device. And since it doesn't have HDMI pass-through, I can't connect the other one. So if I trigger it off of my Z-Cam, I can get it to pass signal all the way through, although it's not reliable. So this is, for some reason, very particular about the input. Now, one big difference between these two is that the LH5 supports 4K inputs. The BM5 and the BM5 Mark II do not. They only accept up to 1080 60 frames per second. This accepts up to 4K 30. So what that means is you might be able to zoom in and have better image quality when you zoom on this guy, except for right now, I'm only getting it a 1080 signal, so it doesn't really matter. It's just gonna make the image bigger. You don't really gain anything as far as resolution. But if you're feeding a 4K signal to this would be a sharper preview on the zoom. I don't like to be critical of products, but I do want to be truthful. In all honesty, this is a really nice monitor. It looks good, it's really bright, it's built well, it has some nice features, it has some good connectivity, but I do feel that the whole camera control portion of this monitor is just not really ready for prime time. Some people might find some of the features useful, but for me, I either want all of the features to work all of the time reliably, or I'm just not going to use it at all. And I think that's been my experience with this, is too many of the features just don't work, or if they they do, they're just really unreliable. If you're looking for a good monitor, I think you should definitely look into this monitor. It's a good value for the money. If you need to have features like some of the camera control features and you think, what you saw might work for you, then this is great. You have other options. The Ninja 5 is a good option as well. The PortKeys LH5 that I showed earlier is a good option. It's more affordable than both of these. This one's the most expensive because it has some internal recording options here. But if you don't need any of that, then I don't think this makes sense. This is definitely the brightest out of all of them. At 2200 nits, you're 700 nits more than the LH5 and 1200 nits more than the Ninja 5. It's more than twice the brightness. So this is going to be a better monitor in daylight, in bright sun. And personally, I prefer to have physical function buttons here, which the Atomos Ninja 5 just doesn't have. I think I'll wrap up my review video right here. I know this one went a little long, but there were just a lot of things to talk about. Stay tuned. I have more videos coming up. Please remember to hit that like and subscribe if you liked what you saw here. Hit that little notification bell if you want to know when I post my next video. I'll see you then.